Winter makes my hometown feel abandoned, like the rest of the world quietly agreed to forget it. The roads narrow under snowdrifts, cell service fades without warning, and the forest presses in from every direction. That's why I didn't question it when my best friend Caleb asked me to come back and help him clean out his grandfather's old farmhouse. Isolation was just part of life out there. Caleb and I had grown up together. We knew every trail, every frozen creek, every story parents told to scare us indoors before dark. When his grandfather passed, Caleb said he couldn't stay in the house alone. I believed him. The place had always unsettled me, even as a kid, too quiet, too watchful. The farmhouse sat at the edge of the woods, its white paint cracked and yellowed, surrounded by bare trees that rattled in the wind like dry bones. Snow buried everything except a narrow path to the door. Inside, it smelled of dust, old paper, and cold iron. The power worked, but barely. The lights flickered like they were thinking about going out for good. The first night passed without incident. We drank cheap coffee, sorted through boxes, and joked about how ridiculous we'd been as kids, afraid of shadows. But the second day, while clearing the barn, I found something strange. Behind a loose wooden panel near the back wall was a stack of notebooks. At least 20 of them. All identical. Brown covers. No labels. Caleb said they must have belonged to his grandfather. But when I opened the first one, my stomach tightened. Every page was filled with neat, cramped handwriting. Dates. Times. Weather conditions. Sketches of the woods behind the house. Then names. Local names. Some crossed out. Some circled. Some underlined again and again. "What was your grandfather doing?" I asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He just stared at the pages, his jaw clenched. That night, the wind howled harder than before. Around midnight, I woke up to a faint clicking sound. Slow. Rhythmic. Like something adjusting. I sat up and listened. It stopped. The next morning, I found footprints outside the house. Not leading to the door. Just circling it. Perfectly spaced. Like whoever made them didn't want to be seen approaching. Caleb said it was probably an animal. But animals don't wear boots. By the third day, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone anymore. We kept finding notebooks, under floorboards, inside tool chests, even sealed in plastic behind the old furnace. Some were newer than others. A few had pages that looked recently handled, corners bent, ink darker. One entry was dated only 2 weeks before we arrived. That made no sense. Caleb became quieter as we read through them. Defensive. When I pointed out patterns, entries that tracked movements around the property, he brushed it off. Said his grandfather had been paranoid. Said isolation did that to people. But paranoia doesn't explain the cameras. I found the first one while collecting firewood. It was mounted high in a pine tree, half buried in snow camouflage, angled directly at the front door. Old, but functional. A faint red light blinked when I moved. When I told Caleb, his face drained of color. He swore he'd never seen it before. That night, our phones lost signal at exactly 9:17 p.m. Both of them. At the same time. The landline rang once and went dead. The clicking sound returned, closer now. Inside the walls? I checked the notebooks again while Caleb slept. That's when I noticed something that made my hands shake. Some of the handwriting wasn't his grandfather's. It was Caleb's. I recognized it instantly. The way he looped his letters. The pressure marks. The margin notes. The newest notebook had only one entry. Today. Weather snow. Visibility low. He's asking questions. I didn't sleep after that. Before dawn, I looked out the window and saw a shape moving between the trees. Slow. Careful. Watching the house. Then I noticed something worse. More footprints. Leading away? Only one set? Caleb was already gone. I left that morning and never went back. I still don't know whether Caleb was being watched, or trained. Whether his grandfather started something that never ended, or whether the house had drawn people into a cycle that never truly ended. I still checked my surroundings in winter. Still avoid rural roads. Still wonder who updates the notebooks now. Because sometimes, when the snow falls heavy and the world goes quiet, my phone loses signal at exactly 9:17 p.m. And I feel like someone out there is still observing, still documenting. I hadn't seen Tessa in almost 6 years. We were inseparable during college. She was loud, fearless, and the kind of friend who could make you laugh until you cried, but life had pulled us in different directions. So when she texted me in early December, inviting me to her family's cabin in the middle of nowhere for a winter reunion, I didn't hesitate. The message sounded innocent enough, but something about the way she phrased it, a little too eager, a little too insistent, gave me a subtle itch of unease I tried to ignore. The drive from the city took longer than I expected. I left after sunrise, the interstate fading into narrow, snow-lined roads. Each mile further from civilization made the trees seem taller, the air sharper. Tessa had warned me not to trust GPS once I left the main highway. She said the cabin was accessible only by a gravel path that wound through pine forests, and that the GPS would insist I drive straight into a frozen creek if I followed it. I laughed at the time, but now, steering through the drifts of snow, I understood she wasn't exaggerating. The cabin appeared suddenly, tucked between two hillocks, its dark wood walls barely visible under the weight of snow. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, which made the place look inhabited and warm, but the emptiness of the driveway suggested otherwise. I grabbed my bag and hesitated at the door, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The lock clicked open before I could knock, and Tessa's smile greeted me from the dimly lit hallway. "You made it," she said, hugging me tight, far longer than necessary. Come in, don't mind the mess." Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of pine and something metallic, almost like iron. The furniture was old, heavy, and mismatched, as though scavenged over generations. She waved me toward the small kitchen. "We'll start with some wine while I show you around." I noticed her hands were trembling slightly, but she covered it quickly with a smile. She poured 2 glasses of red wine and gestured for me to sit. I had barely settled in when she mentioned a journal she'd found in the attic. "It belonged to my uncle," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And it talks about things you're not supposed to know." Curiosity got the better of me. We climbed the creaking stairs, the snow muffling our steps from the outside world. In a dusty corner, she pulled out an old leather-bound book. Its pages were filled with scrawled notes about secret operations in the area, people disappearing, and coded references to the others. But then it took a darker turn, mentions of affairs that ended in accidents, glimpses of ghostly figures lingering near the forest, and hints that these events were tied to something illegal, hidden in plain sight. The sun had set by the time we returned downstairs. Shadows pooled in every corner, and the forest outside became a black wall studded with white snow. That's when I first felt it, eyes watching. At first, I told myself it was just Tessa's paranoia. But then I saw movement, a figure standing just beyond the pines, barely visible, observing the cabin. My stomach tightened, but Tessa laughed it off. "Old family tradition," she said. "They keep an eye on things here. It's probably nothing." I wanted to believe her, but the tension was undeniable. I kept checking the windows, noticing faint footprints that hadn't been there before, leading from the edge of the tree line to the side of the cabin. My mind began spinning possibilities: squatters, thieves, something supernatural. And yet, when I voiced concern, Tessa only smiled, her hand brushing mine in reassurance. By midnight, I was alone in my room, the wind rattling the windows. I tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The journal lay on the bedside table, open to a page that seemed freshly written. "She knows you're coming. Do not let her leave." My pulse spiked. I wanted to dismiss it as a prank or coincidence, but something told me that leaving in the morning wouldn't be as simple as driving away. Something, or someone, was waiting for me. I woke to a hollow silence. The wind had stopped, leaving only the occasional groan of snow-laden branches against the cabin walls. Tessa wasn't in her room, and I thought I heard soft scraping from the kitchen. I crept toward the noise, trying not to make a sound, only to find her standing at the counter, notebook in hand, scribbling rapidly. "Morning," she said without looking up. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Sleep well?" I nodded, trying to mask my unease. The pages she was writing on were filled with the same obsessive notes I had seen the night before. Names, dates, observations about me, every detail I had unknowingly revealed to her through texts, social media, or casual conversation. The realization hit me like a punch. She had been planning this for months, maybe years, turning what should have been a reunion into something darker. Before I could speak, the lights flickered, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, reaching toward me. Then I noticed them, faint silhouettes outside the windows, half hidden by the thick snow. Figures standing silently, watching the cabin. My stomach dropped. "Tessa, who's out there?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she smiled, slowly, deliberately. "You don't need to worry about them," she said. "They're just part of it. Part of the rules." "Part of what?" I wanted to run, but when I reached for my bag, I realized it was gone. My phone was missing too. The sense of isolation that had seemed charming only hours before now felt like a trap. That afternoon, we walked toward the old barn at the back of the property. The snow crunched beneath our boots, masking any other sound. Tessa pulled me inside, revealing crates of papers, maps, and strange devices that looked like homemade surveillance equipment. She told me, casually, that the family had been involved in illegal operations for decades, moving things through the forest, keeping tabs on people, eliminating threats when necessary. And now, according to her, I was part of the story. Fear clawed at my chest. The cabin, the journal, the shadows, they weren't coincidences. They were a warning. Every glance from Tessa, every scribble in her notebook, every frozen figure outside the windows confirmed it. I wasn't just visiting. I was being watched, studied, manipulated. By nightfall, I realized I could not trust the walls around me, or the person who had invited me here. Tessa had vanished into her room, locking the door behind her. The shadows outside grew longer, moving closer. I thought about running, but I had no car keys, no phone, and the snowy forest seemed endless. And then I heard it, a soft whispering, coming from the tree-line. Words I couldn't make out, but the intent was clear. They were watching me, waiting. My stomach turned, my hands trembled, but one thing became horrifyingly clear. Some stories are never meant to end, and some mysteries, once unearthed, will not let you leave alive. I stayed awake all night, listening, watching, realizing it felt like the forest was watching and that the cabin, the journal, and Tessa's obsession were all part of a long-standing pattern I might never understand. By morning, the snow had thickened, the shadows seemed to retreat slightly, and I wondered, if I managed to escape, would anyone ever believe me? Or would I simply vanish into the woods, another story written in someone else's journal? I packed my bag silently when Tessa finally emerged. Her smile was soft now, almost normal, but I knew better. I left the cabin without waking her fully, slipping through the back door, and ran through the snow until I reached the road. I never returned to that forest, and I never answered her messages again. But sometimes, when winter arrives and the wind howls through the pines, I swear I see shadows moving just beyond the tree-line. And I know, somewhere, Tessa is still writing. Winter isolates my house the way walls never could. By December, the road leading out to it turns into a narrow ribbon of ice and dirt, barely plowed, barely used. The nearest town is 20 minutes away on a good day, longer when the snow comes down hard and the trees bend low over the road like they're trying to listen in. That's where I was living when my college best friend, Erin, called me for the first time in almost 5 years. We'd been inseparable back then, late-night study sessions, shared apartments, cheap takeout eaten on dorm floors. He was the kind of person who always had a plan, always knew what came next. So when he told me he needed a place to stay, temporarily, and asked if my rural setup was still as quiet as he remembered. I should have questioned it. I didn't. He arrived in January, right after the first heavy snowfall. His car was unfamiliar, a dark SUV with out-of-state plates and a dented rear panel. He stepped out wearing a heavy coat and gloves, scanning the tree line before smiling at me like nothing had changed. "I just need a few weeks," he said. "Off the grid. Clear my head." That should have been my first warning. At first, everything felt normal enough. We caught up over coffee, talked about old professors, joked about how different life had turned out from what we imagined. But there were small rules Aaron introduced almost immediately. He asked me not to mention him to anyone in town. He asked me not to use my phone near the back rooms of the house. He asked me not to open packages addressed to him. I told myself he was embarrassed, or stressed, or hiding from a bad breakup. Then the equipment started showing up. Unmarked boxes delivered late at night. Hard cases he carried into the spare bedroom and locked. Laptops that were never connected to my internet. A scanner-like device he mounted near the upstairs window, angled toward the road. When I asked him what he was doing, he laughed and said freelance consulting work. Government adjacent, but boring. He said I wouldn't understand it anyway. By the third week, I noticed vehicles slowing down outside the property. Trucks without logos. Headlights idling at the edge of the driveway before driving off. Once, I saw someone standing near the tree line at dawn, gone the moment I blinked. Aaron insisted it was nothing. Then I found the documents. They were tucked inside a waterproof folder under the kitchen sink, like someone had hidden them in a hurry. Maps of the surrounding land, annotated with coordinates. Photos of my house taken from multiple angles. A printed schedule marked with dates and time windows. One line was highlighted. Surveillance confirmed, occupant unaware. That occupant was me. That night, I noticed a blinking red light in the woods behind the house. Then another. Then another, spaced out too evenly to be random. I locked my bedroom door for the first time since moving in. Aaron didn't come back from his drive that night. He returned just before dawn, snow clinging to his boots and the hem of his coat. He didn't look surprised to find me waiting in the kitchen with the documents spread across the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed and sat down like the secret was a burden he'd grown tired of carrying. He told me he couldn't explain everything. That what he was involved in wasn't officially sanctioned, but it wasn't random either. He said certain locations were useful, predictable, quiet, easy to monitor without drawing attention. He said my house had been chosen long before he arrived. I asked him why I was being watched. He said, "Because you were already here." That answer still echoes in my head. After that conversation, the rules changed. I was told when I could leave the house, when I needed to keep lights off, when I should stay away from windows. He installed additional cameras, some obvious, some hidden. My phone stopped holding a charge for more than an hour. The landline went dead completely. One night, I woke to a low humming sound outside. When I looked through the curtains, I saw something hovering above the tree line. Not close enough to see clearly. Close enough to know it wasn't normal. I confronted Aaron again. Told him I wanted out. Told him he needed to leave. He looked genuinely sad when he said it was too late. The danger came suddenly. Tires on gravel. Doors slamming. Flashlights cutting through the dark. Aaron grabbed his equipment and shoved a drive into my hand. "If they ask," he said, "you don't know me." Then he was gone, out the back door, into the woods. The people who entered my house didn't wear uniforms. They didn't introduce themselves. They moved with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they were looking for. They took the equipment, the documents, the cameras. They didn't take me. Before leaving, one of them paused at the doorway and looked back at me. "You won't remember us checking again," he said. "That's the important part." But I do remember. Aaron was never found. No reports. No records. His name stopped appearing online entirely, like it had been erased. I moved away that spring. Still, every winter, I noticed the same signs. Vehicles slowing down. Signals dropping at specific times. New devices appearing near wherever I live, always just far enough away to deny. I don't know what operation my house was part of. I don't know if Aaron was running from it, or helping build it. All I know is that somewhere, there's a file with my name on it. And it's probably still marked active.